And to examine all of this, we're joined tonight from Philadelphia by Justin Thomas Russell, foreign policy and government relations expert with over 35 years of experience in global security and Middle East stability. Justin, a very warm welcome to In Focus, and it's been a while, and I'm so happy I have you with me today.
Good to see you, Rana.
My pleasure. Let's start with the core thesis. Sharon argues Netanyahu's decades-long approach isn't really about managing unsolvable conflicts. It's a deliberate, consistent strategy to prevent Palestinian statehood altogether. Based on your experience, sir, watching this region for over 3 decades, do you find that argument convincing?
Absolutely, Rana. I mean, look, this is nothing new. This has been part of Benjamin Netanyahu's political policy, his political life support system, if you will, inside Israel and on a global scale. What we're seeing is a very drastic maneuver by Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu needs a villain. Hamas and the Palestinians are that villain. And if he can continue to show them as being a very strategic and tactical threat to Israeli security, he is going to exploit that to his political benefit, as we've seen for the past several years and even before in his previous administrations. So this is nothing new. I think that there is a legitimacy to that claim, and we've heard others who have fought to gain or at least work towards a roadmap to a two-state solution. It cost Yitzhak Rabin his life when he was assassinated in Israel several years ago. Prime ministers such as Ehud Omer, who was actively trying to work to a peaceful solution of coexistence. It cost him his political career. This is nothing new, and we shouldn't be surprised at that mantra.
Okay, in this context, of course, Mr. Russell, how does Netanyahu has this capability to do what he's doing and to stay where he stays and to handle the situation in this way? Could you further describe, sir? And then I'll go back to the essay again.
So Benjamin Netanyahu, first and foremost, is a political machine. He has an incredible political ability for self-sustainment and sustaining his political objectives. So when you have somebody with that type of political and external capability, it leads to the idea that he can pretty much bring the message. We're seeing that even today, possibly, with Benjamin Netanyahu just arriving at the White House. We've seen every time he has left a meeting with President Trump, there has been a newfound urgency to deal with the Palestinian question in a violent way, to deal with Iran and other regional, as they would put it, bad actors in a kinetic energy way. So, the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has the political capabilities that he does makes him almost an issue of trying to find a secure and peaceful solution to the Middle East conflict.
The essay describes Netanyahu's approach as status quo today, status quo tomorrow, status quo forever, and also argues that, unlike the far right in his coalition, he never actually believed in annexation fantasies, just an indefinite management. What's the practical difference between those two positions if the outcome for Palestinians looks the same either way?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they kind of help with one objective. That is Benjamin Netanyahu maintaining power. As long as he can maneuver the argument, maneuver the policy, and maneuver the political thinking inside Israel and with their strongest allies, the status quo continues to maintain him in the seat of power as either prime minister, head of party, or as a major regional player that has to be addressed in order to even look at a possibility of stability in the Middle East.
Sharon also writes that Netanyahu's government rejected an international stabilization force in Gaza because it included steps towards Palestinian sovereignty, and that Netanyahu dismissed Hamas's own offer to cede control to the Palestinian Authority. If that's accurate, what was victory in Gaza actually meant to achieve?
I wouldn't say that there's actually a victory in Gaza. When you see the tragic loss of innocent lives at the hands of a conflict between
I don't
Hamas.
see victory as well, sir, in this context, of course.
No, understood, Rana. But again, going back to your question, is the idea. Let me be clear about one thing. I have said this many times. Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinian people. They do not care about the safety and security of the residents of Gaza, and for that matter, the West Bank. They care about Hamas. They care about Hamas being in power. They care about Hamas maintaining a stranglehold over the Palestinian people. That is the bottom line. And, the idea of having Hamas run as both a military, public safety, and political oversight of the Palestinian people does not help the Palestinian people. That being said, Israel cannot continue this ongoing fight. It's not sustainable. And quite frankly, the Israeli people, as we're seeing in recent polling, are getting tired of the continuous ongoing wars that puts their personal safety and their personal security at risk. So, the idea that Benjamin Netanyahu is playing both sides of the fence, which many news outlets have reported the fact that, he kind of facilitated money going towards Hamas, so he had a bad guy so he could maintain his power. It's completely the Shalom report is very telling of the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu in this case is very self-serving in his approach for dealing with the Palestinian question. He is a complete different approach from what we saw with other prime ministers like Yitzhak Rabin, like we saw with Ehud Omer, like we've seen with several former prime ministers of Israel. Even Menachem Begin said peace isn't easy, but peace has to be the solution.
Okay, Mr. Russell, until when will Netanyahu continue blaming Hamas and Hezbollah, of course Hamas and Gaza, for the atrocities and for the genocides and for the humanitarian aid and for the civilians that are killed every day, mostly women and children? Because I understand, if I'm right or wrong, that women and children, when they're killed in the Jewish means, it means a lot. So they're targeting women and children on purpose. This is an issue. And when we come and discuss Lebanon, Hezbollah is a proxy and is another problem that has to be dismantled. Till when will Hezbollah and Hamas be the blame that Netanyahu or the Israelis are always using in their narrative towards any conflict that they breach and ceasefire that they agree upon, and then suddenly it's breached and suddenly they're doing whatever they want to do and they're into a complete whole war and it's over.
Look, Rana,
and of course, on top of all, the international community is only watching.
I understand, and Rana, I do have to push back on one thing. What the pictures that we're seeing coming out of Gaza, out of the West Bank, out of southern Lebanon are horrific. And there are eventually going to have to be leaders in Tel Aviv that are going to have to answer for those actions. But what I do want to push back on is the comment that the IDF is purposely targeting women and children. I am by no means a supporter of the Israeli aggression inside Gaza or the support that they're giving to the settlers in the West Bank or their approach to southern Lebanon. However, I talk to folks inside Israel. I have people that I know inside the IDF, and these are people that I know for a fact that if ordered to purposely target women and children, they would not fulfill that order. That is an illegal order. It clearly goes against international law. It goes against everything from the Geneva Convention, although even though that they would be considered non-uniform combatants, it goes against humanity. And the people know would not undertake that. That being said, we are seeing a continuation of the far right with the support and the direct emphasis by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party is that the idea that they are in fact trying to expand their position in the region. If they were trying to seek a peaceful, credible coexistence with the Palestinians, we would not be seeing Israel or the Israeli government or the Israeli police turning a blind eye to the just blatant aggression of non-sworn settlers in the West Bank against Palestinians in that area. We would not see the continuation of assaults on the people of Gaza. So when we look at the total picture of Israel versus the rest of the world, the reality has to come to fruition in Tel Aviv, inside the Israeli government, that there will be a Palestinian state. That ship has already sailed. We've already seen a lot of the U.S. allies recognize and support a two-state solution, a peaceful coexistence that recognizes both the sovereignty and the existence of an Israeli state, but also gives the same sovereignty and political recognition to a Palestinian state. The key factor here is there has to be personal responsibility of the citizens of both sides. The Israelis are going to have to take personal responsibility and realize that they can have a secure coexistence with the Palestinians that does not include the needless loss of life or the global community using terms like genocide. At the same time, the Palestinians are going to have to realize that the worst thing that they could do from a policy perspective is in fact call for the destruction of Israeli state. That does not help their cause. That does not help peace and stability in the region.
Mr. Russell, before I ask you the other question, thank you very much for justifying my case. And if I was wrong, this was my first comment. My second comment is that when you mentioned the pictures that we see that come out of Gaza or Lebanon, or the atrocities that we watch, this is far away from the real fact on the ground that's taking place in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not the reality.
Understood, and I do see your point, Rana. And what I do want to say to that is, as somebody who has not been in Gaza to witness firsthand the total destruction that I am seeing through both sources that I have in the region and through the various news reports that come out daily from the area, it is hard for me to say what the reality is without seeing it for myself.
Of course, sir. I really appreciate it. I'll leave it there. And the essay, sir, argues that the October 7th shattered the illusion that this conflict could be indefinitely managed rather than resolved, and that Israel's response was less a strategy than what one former Shin Bet chief called the reaction of generals with a bruised ego. How much of the last 2 years of regional conflict, or more than 2 years, sir, in your assessment, stems from that kind of wounded overreaction rather than calculated strategy?
That's a tough question to answer, Anna, because they've become so intertwined with other situations in the region. What started off as a response to a horrible, horrible terroristic action by Hamas into Israel back in October on the October 7th attacks. That reaction could have been, and let's be clear, the Israeli Defense Forces, the Mossad as an intelligence service, and the public safety forces inside Israel are some of the best in the world and have the capabilities of acting in a very tactical manner to achieve an objective that is strategically attainable, which in that case would have been a response to seek out the leadership of Hamas that planned and executed the horrible events of October 7th. That being the case, what we've seen is, whether you want to call it bruised ego or you want to call it an opportunity for Israel to flex its muscle, what we've seen is them overreact and overextend itself to the point where now Israel is more isolated from its political allies than it's ever been. And they continue on a daily basis to lose this. And on the other side of that, we also see the fact that I would argue that Hamas is overplaying its hand in trying to get their objectives, which is for them to get
Hamas this leverage. And of course, I really trust your point of view and respect your point of view in every single interview that we do together. Sir, who brought up Hamas to start with, and as a terrorist organization, and who, from your own narrative, and of course, did you ever think of the 7th of October 2023 as a conspiracy theory, or you never thought of it? It's a
no. I can answer the second part of your question first, and that is no. I never thought it was a conspiracy theory. I would be extremely horrified that if there was any evidence that the Israeli government purposely allowed the killing of over 1,200 Israelis and the capture of over 200 Israelis as hostages for as long as they were held, many of them that were killed in custody, I would be absolutely shocked and appalled to find that out, that the Israeli people would, one, stand for that, or two, allow that. That being said, I do not think there was a conspiracy theory.
Of course, you understand. I asked you this question because I really trust your opinion.
And Rana, you're very kind, and I appreciate that.
I'm not kind.
But I do want to address the first part of your question. Who gave Hamas this power? Who gave them the authority to be the representative for Gaza? I would argue that Hamas gave it to themselves through violence, through political thuggery, through whatever. I've heard the arguments from several in the region that says, well, Hamas was elected to represent the people of, the Palestinian people of Gaza, and that they were the true form of government. That is categorically untrue. Hamas gave this power to themselves, which goes back to my original point that I said earlier in this interview, that Hamas only cares about Hamas. So that being the case, the Palestinian people have an opportunity right now. They have the biggest and largest support for a Palestinian state from the global community, including many allies of Israel that are now calling for a Palestinian state. But what they have to do is take personal responsibility of the fact is what best represents the secure and prosperous future of Palestinians, not what Hamas says. And once they take control of that, it could be away from the Palestinian Authority. It's definitely got to be away from Hamas. But once the Palestinian people unify and come up with a source of global governance for Palestinians in a Palestinian state, then we will see what a true pathway to two-state solution looks like.
Okay, Sharon draws a direct parallel between Netanyahu's 2002 congressional testimony urging the U.S. to take out Saddam Hussein and his current framing of Iran as the head of the octopus, whose removal would solve the region's problems, given how the Iraq war actually unfolded, how should that historically parallel inform how we read the current Iran war?
Rana, I got to answer it this way: is that there has been so much that's happened since that time. We're talking about events that have occurred over the past 20 plus years, and what we've seen
Mr.
is it
Russell,
goes.
what's happened then, it's what's today making a country like Iran. I want to know your, of course, opinion. It's not mine because I have no opinions here. I have to be very neutral.
Yeah.
What happened years ago in Iraq that you don't even remember is the reason why a country like Iran today has leverage, has resilience. Fragmentation of his regime is out of the hands of Israel and the United States, which when they decide to do it, they do it easily.
So the thing of your theory on this, Rana, is the fact that, look, I could go back and say, look, the reason why Iran has such a strong, capable ability to create a stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz, or to create an argument that the United States and our allies have said that it's not a good idea to engage in direct kinetic war with Iran because it's a no-win solution. I could go back and say, look, that's because of the Iran-Iraq war. We could go back to Saddam Hussein and the Ayatollah Khomeini and say that kind of the catalyst that brought Iran to where we are today. We could say that the fact that we've seen a roller coaster of Iran and its political positions.
Yes, I wanted to tell you. I just wanted to tell you it's a vicious circle or a loop that no one is capable of going out of it anymore. Specifically when I'm discussing U.S. and Israel.
Well, look, the fact that we've seen in a direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran, I mean, we all call it the the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. Look, it's been the U.S. versus Iran. Let's be real. That being the case, what we've seen is an extension. We've seen an overflow of this conflict go back to the Israeli-Palestinian question, the Israeli incursion into Lebanon. We have seen all of that become intertwined. That being the case, we cannot sit here and say that this is just a clear black and white argument of U.S. versus Iran, and we'll come up with a solution. As we saw in the original MOU that arguably held, not held, call it what it is, but notice how the MOU brought into play the Israeli presence in Lebanon against Hezbollah, and it even tried to go so far as to include the situation in Gaza. You cannot separate what Israel's actions are today and turn around and say that it doesn't have implications on the greater stability of the region. We're seeing this today. And I believe that that's part of the factor of why Benjamin Netanyahu is at the White House right now.
Why is he at the White House, and on top of his agenda is the U.S.-Israel war? Why?
I think part of it was, he was going to be in the area anyway. As we saw, he attended the.
I'm asking my question. I think you misunderstood me here. No, why is on top of his agenda of discussions with U.S. President Donald Trump the war in Iran, covering up what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon?
That's Benjamin Netanyahu's playbook. Anytime he gets an audience with President Trump. Yeah, he's going to do this. This is nothing new, Anna. We've seen Benjamin Netanyahu play this game before, where he will come.
And until when will he continue playing these games? Because we have to live in peace at some time. And
Look,
this was the promise of Donald Trump during his campaign. He is a man of peace.
Yeah, but Rana, that argument has been thrown out the window.
You threw it out of the window. I threw it out of the window as well. If you say so.
But Donald Trump, not your argument. Donald Trump's argument of him being a man of peace. He does not want to get into these long-standing external wars in the region. That's gone. He has no credibility with that argument. That campaign promise has been trashed. As a result, we are where we are right now. You asked the question of why what's on the back end? What is the secret agenda for Benjamin Netanyahu in having this bilateral meeting with Donald Trump at the White House? It is the same thing we see every time he walks through the doors of the West Wing. Benjamin Netanyahu is going to make an argument to Donald Trump that says that a continuation of aggression against Iran is critical, that the U.S. needs to support Israel in its fight against Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. And I would venture to say, because he's done this before, is to say that in order to maintain stability, the U.S. needs to support Benjamin Netanyahu's expansion of the communities in the West Bank, the settlements, which have been deemed illegal by every international authority out there. So that's his back end agenda. He knows he's got a favorable ear. Benjamin Netanyahu will go into the Oval Office and tell Donald Trump how great he is, how much of a strong man and a strong leader he is, and the world loves him. And Donald Trump is going to buy into it. As a result, Benjamin Netanyahu, although temporarily, will still get his way, because all of a sudden I would not be surprised
that Donald Trump here have the capability to help Benjamin Netanyahu at this point? Can he continue fighting, or can he continue striking and bombing all these countries together?
That is a great question. And there are so many factors to consider in this. You look at right now, Donald Trump has low approval ratings for his handling of the war. This war, which the United States initiated, they started it, has caused an economic global effect throughout the markets. It has caused Americans to pay higher for gas prices. It has made the cost for Americans to live affordably out of reach. And it has created a global economic impact that is going to hamper part of what is going to lead into midterm elections in November. Donald Trump is painted himself into a very difficult political and power corner. Excuse me.
Go ahead, sir. It's my pleasure that you do anything.
Thank you. But he's painted himself into such a corner that it is unforeseeable that, again, his own base put him into office back in 2020 when he said, I am done with these longstanding, forever wars. I will never get us into another conflict. In fact, he brags about how he's solved all of these other global conflicts. I don't know what the count is, 9, 10. I don't know what he's using these days. But the reality is that you can't say that, because Donald Trump is going back and forth on how he deals with the actions of Israel. And I don't think he realizes how much of a political hurdle he has to jump over to address that the way he wants to, not the way the rest of the American people want it. The American people didn't want to see 600 injuries as a result of the Iranian war. They did not want to see the numerous deaths that have occurred to U.S. service members in this conflict. Donald Trump saying he's a man of peace, his actions don't say so.
Mr. Russell, I wish, of course, we had more information about the Netanyahu-Trump meeting that's taking place now. I wish we had, because it would take us to a wide range of discussion today and to take us to another level of discussion. But my final question here is, Sharon ends by saying, the question is not whether a reckoning comes, but whether it arrives by design or by a catastrophe. Based on everything happening right now, Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Israel's own elections in the fall, which outcome do you think is more likely, sir?
I have to believe, Rana, that the outcome will be the Israeli people will stand up to this. That the Israeli people will realize, look, the Israeli people are not ignorant to the fact that the Israeli state in its own existence poses a risk to their existence. That being said, I think the Israeli people are tired of the air raid sirens, the explosions, the constant isolation that their own country feels when they deal with other leadership in government.
Sir, here you said practical leadership. What did you exactly mean by practical leadership?
I go back, look, just a few months ago, I sat down with, as I mentioned his name earlier, I sat down with Ehud Omer, and talking about what practical leadership in Israel looks like. It is creating a practical leadership is, and these are my comments to him, is to me, a practical leadership in Israel looks like this: having a defense force and having a national security mechanism that protects the people of Israel every day from terrorism, from outside aggression, etc. That
do you see this leadership coming?
Do I see practical leadership coming? Possibly. I don't know. I mean, I can't look at crystal ball and find out who's going to be the next prime minister or who's going to be the next ruling party inside the Knesset that's going to determine who the prime minister and the president are. But are there practical leaders inside Israel and inside government that are tired of seeing both attacks on Israel and the continued loss of innocent lives at the hands of the IDF? Of course there are. Could they win in October? I hope they do.
Mr. Russell, of course, go ahead. You hope they do, and then?
I hope they do. I hope that the Israeli people come up with the notion that there can be a peaceful coexistence without giving away their sovereignty or their right to exist.
We all hope so, Justin Thomas Russell. Of course, sir, I have all the pleasure. You made my day today, actually, by being with you in this very, very interesting interview. Thank you for that clear-eyed and historically grounded conversation. Historically, really, in all means, I really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for being with us. Sharon's argument at its core: decades of apparent caution and crisis management were actually one consistent political project, and Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, the supposed head of the octopus, aren't departures from it, they're its failing endpoint. The 2002 Arab Peace Initiative still sits unclaimed. Iran has come out more resilient, not less. Sharon's closing warning: the reckoning isn't avoidable, only delayed by design or by catastrophe. That's In Focus. I'm Rana Qassas. Moving next to our top stories. Don't go away.